The great hall of the Velari Empire shimmered under the light of floating crystals that hovered in perfect silence above the heads of thousands of gathered officials. Each step on the glass floor echoed with weight. Every breath was heavy with the pressure of politics. It was the first time in known history that the humans had been invited to speak directly with the ruling monarch of the Velari. All eyes were on the newcomers from Earth as they stood in straight lines, wearing clean uniforms and watching every movement around them with trained caution. Mason stood at the end of the formation, a simple guard among diplomats and officers. He wasn't special. He wasn't even supposed to be here. A last-minute replacement, pulled from another assignment after a fellow guard had fallen ill. This was his first mission off-world, and already, the ceiling looked too high, the air too clean, and the silence too deep. His grip on his rifle stayed firm, though his heart beat a little too fast. He had heard stories about the Velari Queen, that she was ancient, powerful, and completely merciless. That she ruled not just with strength, but with the kind of intelligence that made even the bravest generals nervous. No one had seen her in person for years. She rarely attended meetings herself. The fact that she was present today meant something big. Mason didn't know what, and it wasn't his place to ask. A low chime rang through the hall. The room fell silent. Then came the sound of footsteps, steady and echoing. From the grand arch at the far end of the hall, the queen appeared. She moved like water, her long dark robe trailing behind her like smoke, her presence so heavy it made the air feel different. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, taking in the human delegation without blinking. Mason kept his gaze forward, trying not to draw attention. But when her eyes reached him, they stopped. She froze. Her feet stopped moving. Her guards noticed it first. They glanced at one another, unsure. The queen had paused in the middle of her walk, staring straight at a man who by all logic should have been invisible to her. Mason felt a chill run down his spine, but he did not move. He did not dare. The hall remained silent for a moment longer. A strange tension rising in the air, like static before a storm. Then the queen finally moved again, but not forward. She turned her head slightly, still watching Mason, her expression unreadable. Her fingers twitched once at her side. One of her advisors stepped forward and spoke quietly, asking if something was wrong. She gave no answer. Slowly, she lifted a hand in motion for all her own people to step back. The humans shifted slightly, unsure of what was happening. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it reached every corner of the room. There was no anger in it, no command, only confusion, buried under layers of control. "What is your name, human?" Mason blinked. For a moment, he thought she was talking to someone else. A high-ranking officer maybe, but no one else had reacted. Everyone was looking at him now. He straightened slightly, forcing himself to speak clearly. "My name is Mason, Guard Class 3. Earth Security Division." The queen stared for another long moment. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to see something deeper beneath the surface of his skin. Her breathing was controlled, but something was breaking through her royal mask. Not fear, not hate, something else. Something older. "You were not in the original delegation list," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "No, Your Majesty," Mason said carefully. "I was assigned at the last minute." She took a step forward, and this time her guards hesitated before following. It was clear they didn't understand what was happening either. She was too close now. Close enough for Mason to see the faint shimmer in her skin, the way her eyes reflected the light with an unnatural gleam. He held still, trying not to seem nervous. "You look like someone I once knew," she said finally. Mason didn't know what to say to that. His training hadn't prepared him for this. He was just a guard. He wasn't supposed to talk. He wasn't supposed to be noticed. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," he said softly. She tilted her head. It wasn't anger in her face. It wasn't even confusion anymore. It was something sad, deeply sad. "It's not your fault," she said. "But your face, it is a mirror." She turned away from him then and walked toward her throne without another word. The hall remained tense, but the silence began to ease. The Queen's advisors whispered to one another. The human delegation looked confused. Mason remained frozen in place, unsure of what had just happened. But deep in her seat, far above the rest, the Queen leaned back with her hand covering her mouth, eyes distant. Something had shifted. Something in the past had returned, dragging itself into the present through the face of a man who had never even heard her name before today. The meeting ended without a proper conclusion. The Queen had said little after taking her place on the throne. Her officials whispered among themselves, trying to understand her strange behavior. The human diplomats exchanged unsure looks, wondering if they had somehow made a mistake. But no one said anything about the guard at the edge of the formation. No one spoke about Mason. He was quietly pulled aside after the gathering, taken down a long hallway by one of the alien attendants. The woman did not speak to him, and her expression gave nothing away. Mason followed in silence, still unsure of what exactly had happened. His mind replayed the moment when the Queen had stopped walking and stared at him as if she had seen a ghost. He tried to remember if he had done something wrong with his posture or eyes or expression. But no answer came. The hallway led to a small chamber with soft lights and a single chair in the center. The walls were curved like a dome, smooth and clean. The door closed behind him with a sound that reminded him of falling water. He stood there for a moment, unsure if he was meant to sit or stand. Before he could make a decision, the door opened. Again, she entered alone. The Queen stepped inside without guards or attendants. Her robe flowed behind her like ink in clear water, but this time she looked less like a ruler and more like a woman carrying something heavy. Her eyes met his again, and for a second, Mason felt the same strange pressure on his chest as before. It was not fear. It was not danger. It was something more difficult to understand. She didn't ask him to sit. She didn't sit herself. She walked around him slowly, as if studying him from every angle. Mason stood still, unsure whether he was being judged or measured. "You were born on Earth," she said at last. "Yes," Mason replied. "In the North Sector, near the coast." "Parents, my mother is alive. She works in transport. My father passed away. When I was young, you were trained for security, never for diplomacy." "Correct." The Queen nodded once, her hands behind her back. She circled him again and came to a stop in front of him. Her eyes were not cold now. They looked almost lost. "Do you know why I reacted the way I did today? I don't, Your Majesty. You have his face. His exact face. The same eyes. The same way of standing. The same way of keeping silent when you are unsure." Mason didn't know what to say. He looked at her, trying to understand the weight behind her words. Her voice was steady but softer than before. "Many years ago, before your people ever made contact with ours, I ruled beside someone who was both my mate and my partner in power. He was clever and strong and believed in peace more than war. He thought we could build something new. Together we changed the structure of our empire. We introduced new laws, new ways of speaking to the outer worlds, but not everyone agreed. Some wanted to keep the old ways. Power without mercy, control without compassion." She walked away from him. As she spoke, her voice growing quieter. "They called him a traitor, accused him of disloyalty, said he was making the empire weak. He was taken from me by the very council that now advises me. They told me he had escaped. But I never saw him again. I never found proof of his death. Only silence." Mason listened carefully. The story felt old, like something buried for a long time suddenly pulled into the light. He could hear the pain beneath her calm voice. Not anger, not bitterness, but grief. That had turned to stone, and now, she said, turning to face him again, you arrive with his face. You speak with a voice that is not his, but still close enough to stir what I buried. I do not believe in ghosts. But you are a reminder I was not ready for. I'm sorry, Mason said again, and this time he meant it in a deeper way. Not for anything he had done, but for the pain she clearly carried. She looked at him as if searching his face for something, maybe an answer, maybe a memory. Then she stepped closer and raised her hand slowly, not touching him, but holding it near his face. Her fingers trembled for just a moment before she pulled back. You are not him, she said. But you are enough like him to make me question what I know. Mason wanted to ask who this man was, what had made him special, but he stayed silent. He could see that asking might reopen wounds too deep. The Queen turned away and walked to the edge of the chamber where a control panel lit up under her touch. A soft hum filled the room. Lights shimmered in the air and formed an image. It was a projection of a face. Mason stared. It was like looking into a mirror. The man in the image was older, but the resemblance was clear. Same jaw, same eyes, same shape of the shoulders. It was more than just a passing similarity. It was close enough to make Mason feel like the universe had played a strange trick on them both. His name was Tareen, she said, and he believed in your kind long before anyone else did. He said one day humanity would rise and teach us things we had forgotten. He said their fire would not be one of destruction, but of balance. Mason didn't know what to say. All he could think about was the pain in her voice, the loss she carried, and the strange fact that his face had opened a door long thought closed. Why am I here? He asked softly. The Queen looked at him, and for the first time her expression changed. Not cold, not unreadable, but tired. That is what I intend to find out. After the Queen ended their conversation, Mason was taken to a private chamber inside the royal wing and placed under soft confinement, which was not a prison, but not exactly freedom either. The room had no locks, but there were guards outside, and the cameras in the corners reminded him that he was being watched at all times. He had no idea what was happening outside, whether the diplomatic meeting had continued or broken down, whether Earth's officials had protested his removal or stayed silent. The only thing he knew for sure was that his life had shifted the moment the Queen had seen his face inside his room. The hours passed slowly. Mason sat on a bench staring at the polished floor, thinking about the face in the projection. The man named Tareen. The resemblance was too real to ignore. It made him wonder if there was something more to this. Maybe he had a connection to this Tareen, maybe through some old link in human DNA, maybe through something forgotten or erased in history. But every time he chased that thought, it led nowhere. His records were clean, his bloodline ordinary. He was a normal man, a soldier raised on Earth who had never even heard of the Velari before this mission. Then came the visitor. Tall alien entered without warning, his uniform sharp and his posture stiff. He had dark markings across his face and a cold look in his eyes. He did not introduce himself. He simply stood in the doorway and stared at Mason like someone examining a dangerous weapon. You are either a mistake or a strategy, he said at last. His voice was low, filled with something that sounded like contempt. The Queen is known for her strength, but she is still a living being, and living beings can be manipulated. The humans have studied our history. They have spies. They know what Taran meant to her, and they found someone who looks like him to place in her path at the right moment. It is clever, but it will not work. Mason stood up slowly, confused and angry. I don't know what you're talking about. I was assigned here by chance. I didn't even want to come to this mission. That is exactly what a spy would say. I am not a spy. Then prove it, the alien said. Show us your records. Let us search your thoughts. Let us tear apart your past. Mason's fists tightened, but he stayed calm. I have nothing to hide. The alien stepped closer. You should understand something, guard. This is not a simple meeting anymore. What you look like has already shifted the balance. The queen is hesitating, and that makes her vulnerable. If her judgment is clouded by old emotions, then it is our duty to protect her from manipulations. Oh, you think I'm a threat because I look like someone she used to care about. I think you are dangerous because you exist. Mason didn't respond. The words were heavy and full of warning, and he knew better than to argue with someone who had already decided he was guilty. The alien left without another word, but the message was clear. He was not safe here, and it wasn't just about politics anymore. It was personal. Later that evening, the queen came again. But this time her posture was different. She looked tired, her robe was simpler, her crown gone. Her voice was softer, but her eyes were sharper. I heard what was said to you, she told him. The council is restless. They believe you are part of a plot. They believe I am compromised and, are you? Mason asked quietly. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the wall and activated a projection. This time it was not of Taran, it was a memory, a real one. Mason saw a younger version of the queen laughing in a bright garden with a man who looked just like him. They walked together, like they belonged, like they were a piece of something whole. The queen watched the memory in silence, then ended it. That was the last time I saw him, she said. They told me he escaped punishment. They told me he was banished and later killed by mercenaries. But no one ever brought back proof, and when I asked questions, the answers were always too clean, too easy. You think he's still alive? Mason asked. If he is, then you might be connected to him, and if he isn't, then your face is something else entirely, a coincidence or a message from the stars. Either way, the council is right about one thing: you are affecting Mesh. Turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. I do not want war with your people, and I do not want to believe in shadows. But when I look at you, I feel like the past is trying to speak through your presence. I do not know whether to silence it or listen. Mason stepped closer, not out of boldness, but out of shared confusion. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know who this terrain really was or why I look like him, but I can promise you I'm not a spy. I'm not here to trick you. I'm just a man who was in the wrong place at the right time, or maybe the right place at the wrong time. I don't know anymore. The queen stared at him for a long moment. Then she said something that caught him off guard. Would you let me search your memories? Mason hesitated. It was not a small request. The Velari had technology that could go deep into a person's mind, pulling out thoughts, images, and even buried feelings. It was safe mostly, but it was still an invasion of privacy. If it clears your doubts, he said, then yes. Queen raised a hand and the room responded. A device lowered from the ceiling, soft lights blinking around it. Mason sat down and let the machine surround his head. There was a soft sound like humming, and then everything went still. He felt something move through his thoughts, not forceful, but searching. The queen stood nearby, her eyes closed as if listening to music, only she could hear. After a few minutes, the machine powered down. She opened her eyes and looked at him differently now. Not with suspicion, but with something gentler. You were telling the truth, she said. You are not Taran reborn. You are something else entirely. Then what am I? The question hung in the air. The queen turned away, but this time there was no coldness in her steps. Only quiet thought. You are a mirror of a memory, and perhaps that is why the stars brought you here. Queen sat alone in her private chamber after the memory scan, and silence surrounded her like a second skin. The stars beyond the large window blinked gently, but her mind was filled with movement, thoughts spinning in endless circles. Her court expected her to act with certainty, to lead without emotion, but something in her had changed since she saw that face again. It was just a face, just a man, just a guard who had spoken with simple honesty and looked at her without fear. Yet the effect of his presence had grown heavier each day, and now she could no longer pretend that it meant nothing. Outside her chamber, the council gathered once more. The room was tall, with walls made of light and crystal, and voices filled it with sharp warnings, political demands. The High Counselor stood at the center, speaking clearly, as others listened and nodded. He was the same one who had visited Mason earlier, his eyes full of doubt and his words filled with suspicion. The human must be removed, he said. Not only from the palace but from the negotiations entirely. His influence on the queen is dangerous. We do not know what he is or why he resembles Taran, but we do know what he is causing, and that is enough. He must leave or we end contact with Earth. Others spoke in agreement. One voice tried to suggest further study, but it was drowned out by louder demands. The council had made up its mind, and now all that remained was for the queen to give her final word. When she entered the room, every voice stopped. She moved with slow grace, her expression calm but unreadable. She stood at the center and looked at each of them one by one, letting the silence stretch longer than usual to remind them who she was. You fear him because he looks like someone I once loved, she said. You think I am blind to the risk, but I see it clearly. He does not carry Theron's blood, nor his memories. He is not here with hidden plans. And he has not once tried to influence me with his face or words. He has only responded to the storm you created around him. Counselor stepped forward respectfully, but firmly. With all due respect, Your Majesty, the appearance of this human has already weakened your position. He has brought emotion into a place where there should only be reason. If others outside this empire learn that you are letting old feelings decide policy, they will see weakness. The queen's gaze did not shift. I am not guided by emotion. I am guided by instinct, and instinct tells me this is no accident. His presence is not just a reflection of the past, it is a signal that our future is being tested here. If we push him away, we may push away something far greater than we understand. So you will let him stay? The counselor asked. No. Queen answered, he will not stay because I command it. He will stay because I will speak to him as a sovereign ruler and ask him what he chooses. The council broke into whispers, but no one dared object again. She had spoken with finality, and her word was law. In a smaller room just beyond the chamber, Mason waited quietly, dressed in his guard uniform without armor. He had not been given any explanation, just an order to appear and wait. But he sensed that something important was about to happen. When the queen entered, he stood immediately. She did not ask him to sit. She simply looked at him for a long moment, as if trying once more to understand what fate had placed between them. They want me to send you away, she said. They believe your face has blinded me. They think I am too close to the past to see the present. And are they wrong? Mason asked gently. I do not know, she said with honest weight. I look at you and remember the man who believed we could change everything. But you are not him, and I cannot pretend that you are. Still, something in me tells me that if I turn you away now, I will regret it for the rest of my life. Mason stood quietly, absorbing her words. He had no strategy, no clever line to offer. He was just as confused by the situation as she was. You don't have to keep me here, he said. Just don't blame yourself for how the universe looks at me. I didn't choose this face, and I didn't come here to cause trouble. The queen took a step closer, and her voice lowered. What if you are here for a reason, not one that was planned by humans, or Valari, but something greater? What if this is a chance for both our kinds to understand each other in a way they never could through politics? Mason looked into her eyes, and this time he did not see a queen. He saw a woman carrying the weight of leadership, loss, and memory all at once, and beneath it, he saw strength that refused to break. What do you want from me? He asked. She looked down for a moment, then raised her eyes again. I want to offer you a choice. You can return to your people and leave all of this behind, or you can remain as an ambassador, not for Earth, but for understanding between us, not as a diplomat, not as a soldier. Just as yourself. Mason was quiet for a long time. The offer was unexpected and heavy with meaning. If he stayed, he would be watched, judged, whispered about by both sides. But if he left, he might never understand why. The stars had led him here in the first place. So stay, he said, not because I think I can fix anything, but because I think I was meant to be here, even if I don't know why yet. The queen nodded slowly, and for the first time since their meeting, a small shift came over her face. A breath of peace, a moment of trust. Then stay, she said, and let us see what comes of it. Days passed after Mason made his choice to stay within the Velari royal court, and during those days the air around the palace felt different. Where once there had been tension and suspicion, now there was something more uncertain but calmer, a quiet curiosity that slowly began to replace the heavy silence that had hung over the halls. The queen resumed her duties with her usual strength, but those closest to her noticed the change in her voice, the slight pause in her walk, the way she sometimes looked out the great windows, longer than before, as if searching the stars for something. Beyond politics, Mason did not return to the guard lines, nor did he wear the human uniform again. Instead, he was given a neutral robe of soft dark fabric marked with no symbols of rank or power, a simple garment meant to represent his new role, though no one had a name for what that role really was. He was not a soldier, not a diplomat, not a servant or a spy. He was just present, walking beside the queen during meetings, listening quietly during debates, and never speaking unless spoken to. Some in the council still watched him with cold eyes. Some whispered that he was only there to manipulate the queen through memory, but no proof was ever found against him. And when questioned by both humans and Velari alike, Mason answered with the same calm honesty he had carried from the beginning. His words never clever, but always sincere, and that sincerity slowly began to soften even the hardest stares. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the palace, the queen invited Mason to walk with her in the royal gardens, a place rarely open to outsiders. The garden was a strange, beautiful space where alien trees grew in patterns, guided by ancient music, and the air was filled with a sweet scent that had no name. On earth, they walked slowly between glowing leaves and branches that moved gently as they passed, as if acknowledging their presence. "Do you regret staying?" she asked him without turning her head. "No," he said, "not for a second," even with the stares and the weight of their doubts. Even then she nodded slightly, her eyes fixed on a tall silver flower that opened only once every decade. "I have been a ruler for longer than your world has known our name," she said. "I have faced wars that shook the stars. I have signed peace with enemies who burned cities behind their words, but nothing has ever unsettled me like the moment I saw your face and realized it was not his, yet it still reached somewhere deep in me." "And not him," Mason said quietly, "and I never will be, and that is why you matter," she answered, "because you do not carry his past, and yet you made me feel it again. You reminded me that what I lost was not just a person, but a part of myself that I had buried for the sake of survival." They paused near a small pool where light floated just above the surface. Like fireflies caught in time, the queen sat on a low stone bench, and Mason stood beside her. The quiet between them was no longer awkward or uncertain. It was full of meaning. "You see," she said, "Turin believed in bridges, not walls. He believed that humanity would one day bring back something we had forgotten: compassion without weakness, hope without control." And when he spoke of Earth, he smiled in a way I never saw with anyone else. He said that humans still remembered what it meant to feel everything, even when it hurt. "Do you think he was right?" Mason asked. She looked up at the sky, and then at him. "And I think that maybe you being here now is proof of it." In the days that followed, the queen made a public announcement, one that surprised both the Velari Empire and the Human Alliance. She declared the creation of a new council, not of rulers but of listeners, a group made of members from both species, meant to understand one another beyond politics and trade. It was not a treaty, it was not an alliance, it was a step toward trust, a quiet revolution dressed in words of peace. Mason was appointed to the council not as a leader, but as a constant presence, a voice to remind both sides that understanding began with listening, not commanding. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried the weight of someone who had seen the fragile thread between past and future, and chosen to hold it gently. Years passed, and the tensions that once threatened war gave way to cautious cooperation. Small changes began to shape both worlds: cultural exchanges, education programs, shared missions across stars. Mason remained at the heart of it all, not as a symbol of lost love, but as a living reminder that even the strangest twist Of fate could lead to healing. The queen ruled for many more years, her power never questioned again. And yet those who served her closely often said she changed after the day she met the human guard. Her decisions became more thoughtful, her voice warmer, her punishments less sharp. She never spoke of Taran again, and never called Mason by his name when alone. She simply called him you. One night, long after the council had become a permanent part of both governments, and long after Mason had grown older with gray at his temples and slower steps, the queen stood with him once more in the garden where they had spoken years ago. The silver flower bloomed again, as it did once every decade, and she looked at him with the same eyes that had once held so much pain, now filled with quiet peace. You were never him, she said, and yet you gave me something. Even he could not a second chance to believe in what we both forgot. Mason smiled, not as a guard or a diplomat, but as the man who had once stood frozen in the hall, unsure why a queen had stopped walking. Maybe that's what I was meant to be, he said. Not a copy, not a memory, just a reason to remember. Queen said nothing more, and in that silence they stood together as the moons rose high above them, casting light on a story that had begun with a face and ended with understanding. The end.